My journey began in an art library not unlike this one, where they had hundreds of books about Picasso. And I just had to go through every single one of them to trace down the history of the art. So what began as a few days turned into a few weeks, turned in a few months. And I want to take you and show you what I found. Every day during my research, I had to go through several books, and I became a speed reader of sorts. But what I was searching for were images of doves that Picasso did during his career. And after maybe 2 or 3 months of research, I came across this book, which turned out to be the most significant book in my research. It's titled Nazi Occupation: Picasso's Paintings and Watercolors and Drawings during the 1940 to 1944 time period. And as I went through this book, I started to discover sketches that Picasso did in November of 1942. Let me show you some of the sketches. Here you go. So when I got to this page for the first time in my research after many months, I began to see Picasso's drawings of dove images. And as I studied each one and compared it to the lost dove, I began to see similar characteristics and features. It turns out these are the working drawings that Picasso did in anticipation of doing this masterpiece. And what I found in this book is that there were, no matter what major work he did, he also created several precursors or several drawings as he worked towards a final masterpiece. And so these 3 works were the precursors to this image, the Lost Dove. And as an example, each one of these are gouache watercolors, which is what the Lost Dove is. Each one have the black India inking on it, which is again what is in the Lost Dove. There is penciling around the breast of this image, and there's penciling around the breast on the Lost Dove. Each of them have the same style of feathering around the feet of the dove. You can see that here and here and here. And it also appears in this image of the Lost Dove. So the best estimation is that this work of art was done in the last week of November 1942, after these sketches and preliminary works were completed. So the journey in the libraries lasted about 6 months in Texas, and then I traveled to Washington, D.C., to New York City, to Denver, to St. Louis, to Connecticut, and to Montana, tracing as much as I could the history of the art and where it had gone since it was created in 1942. And I kept up with the notes and wrote a book. Really, this is a diary of that journey, and this is available on the website. You can check with the QR code. It's interesting because there's so much interesting history about this, so many interesting people that I've met. I also encountered scientific DNA experts in the field of DNA science. And because this is stained with human blood, one of the most fascinating research journeys I went on was that DNA science. And I've dealt with a number of people, and just let me reference their names here just for a second so you can see who I've dealt with. So I started with Cheryl Carrabba. She's the curator of the LBJ library, and she's an Oxford trained paper curator. And she was the first one that recognized that this was human blood on the note. And she referred me to Dr. Lori Baker at Baylor University. She's a Harvard-trained expert in DNA. And she referred me to Dr. Terry Melton at mitotyping at the University of Pennsylvania. And she's considered one of the leading experts at the United Nations. And so whenever there's a massive grave found anywhere in the world, mitotyping is called, and Dr. Terry Melton is the person that goes and extracts that DNA. And so the amount of information that I've learned, the science of DNA, is absolutely incredible. From there, we hired Dr. Rhonda Roby of the Craig Ventnor Institute in California. And she extracted DNA samples from some of the relatives in Spain, which We have an image that I'll show you. And we dealt with Dr. Jose Lorente, the leading European DNA expert. And so because this blood is purported to be by Picasso, it's his own personal blood, we've reached the highest levels of DNA science, and they're all fascinated to work on this. Because if you can imagine, with the DNA science of Pablo Picasso's blood, we can map out really maybe what made him a genius. And so it's something that has world interest. But again, all of this is in the book. So, years and years of research. I think I was researching it for a total of 5.5 or 6 years. And then after that, and I want to take you to the next chapter of the story and tell you about the next 3 years. And we'll do that somewhere else. There definitely is a faith element to our story. Almost from the very beginning, I've sensed that this is a providential journey that I'm on. I mean, the discovery of the art of such magnitude by somebody who has no knowledge of art history or no knowledge of music is astounding to me. So I've always thought that there was great providence in this journey. And after my 6 years of research, I spent 3 years in prayer, really just hoping to cross paths with somebody who could help me bring this story to Broadway. Now, I'd never written anything for entertainment, so I had no knowledge of that background, but I just felt like God would bring somebody into my path. And so I met Russell Rice. And Russell was one of the few people that really grasped the story very quickly. Really, very few people understand the scope of the story when I start to tell it, but Russell did. And he had a friend in New York City that had been writing Broadway musicals for 20 plus years. And so he introduced me to the key person that made this happen, a man named Paul Cosby. Paul was a person of faith like I am and like Russell is. And he came down to Fort Worth to meet me. And we met at a Panera. And Paul understood the full scope of the story in such a short time frame, maybe 6 or 7 minutes. He understood all of it. And nobody that I've ever met in my now 14-year journey has understood it as well and as completely as Paul did. So Paul was in completely. He understood it. He was excited about it. This is what he had been hoping to find. And so that very night, he went and wrote our first song, It's Good to Be Me, our opening number to our Broadway show. He understood the story so well. And so Paul has turned out to be the key figure that has made this come to life. There's no question I did the research and I had the original story and I had the art, but turning that into an entertainment venue was beyond my capabilities. And so Paul was gracious enough to collaborate with me, and together we wrote the book. But he is the genius behind the lyrics, and he is the senior composer of our music. Meeting Paul was an act of providence, and it's been like that throughout my journey. One of my other composers, Luis Banuelos, is a guitarist in Austin, and I just want to tell you briefly this story about God's providence. I was driving to Austin to meet my son for dinner, and during the 2.5-hour drive, I prayed the whole time, Lord, I need to find a Spanish guitarist. I know that Picasso loves Spanish guitar, but how am I going to find a Spanish guitarist? Do I need to go to Spain? It was really a conversation and prayer mixed, but it lasted the entire 2.5 hours. Well, that night after dinner, my son Joel and I went out and we had a drink at an open bar outside, and a lovely evening. And within about 5 minutes, a guitarist came down and sat maybe 10 feet away from me and pulled out his guitar and began to play. And Luis Banuelos is maybe the greatest guitarist that's ever come out of the Austin community. Absolutely incredibly talented flamenco Spanish guitarist. And so I was dumbfounded that I'd prayed all day to meet one, and somebody crossed paths with me. So I took out all the money I had in my pocket, gave it to Luis, and said, let's have coffee tomorrow. Well, it turns out Luis has joined our team, and he's written at least 5 of our major songs. And I would have never met him had that day of prayer had not taken place. I've had to live by faith, believing that God would bring somebody in my path And it's the same way with the investors that are going to eventually help us bring this to stage. I've always believed that at some point, the right person would cross paths with me. And they also, like Paul and like Russell, would get the story. And so part of the journey is putting these shows on in the hopes of attracting the attention of somebody that's significant enough to partner with us. But again, we are walking by faith. There is a faith element. And I think that also speaks to our mission statement. We want to be emissaries for peace across the world with this story. That's really our mission. The theme of our project is courage for peace. And there's no doubt that it's inspired by our relationship with the Prince of Peace. And everybody in this project really is our faith-based people. And it's not that we want to tell a religious story, we don't. We want to tell a story about Picasso's courage. But we recognize the enduring values, the transcendent values of this story. And we want to make sure we honor not only his life, his family's life, his courage, but we also want to honor this message of peace. We've trusted God would bring people into our paths at the right time. We're doing the same thing now. We've always believed that the right person with the wealth would join us on this journey, that they would also catch the vision, understand the story. And it's more important for us to get the right person than anything else. And so as you watch the show tonight, we'll be in prayer. And if you are as well, maybe you're the person we've been looking for. And if we live long enough to finish this project, we intend to impact the world with this message of peace. That's our goal. This is something that's happened to me throughout my journey. When the curator saw the art, these were her responses. They still echo in my memory. Oh my God, oh my God. Where did you find these? Oh my God. Who knows you have these? Oh my God, where are you keeping these? And so, without ever having to ask her, do you think they're real? By her emotional reactions, it was obvious that she felt they were real.
When I heard the story, I was just blown away by it and almost immediately saw the opportunity to tell this story of Picasso. And at that time, I knew very little about Picasso beyond what I think almost everyone knows, that he was an artistic genius. As I like to say, he was a flamboyant and flawed genius, and that he had an amazing story. What I didn't know was the story of him, the portrait of the Dove of Peace, and his time in Paris during the occupation by the Nazis. Ken and I decided to work together on this, to write the script or the book together. And I immediately began researching Picasso, his history, from birth to death, but particularly the time during World War II.
On June 22, 1940, the government of France officially signed an armistice with Nazi Germany, ceding control of Paris to the Nazi-controlled subordinate Vichy government of France. On June 23rd, the next day, Hitler marched into Paris. Among those residents who remained was Pablo Picasso. Because of his fame, his notoriety, and his wealth, he could have chosen to flee. But he viewed Paris as his beloved city and remained. He was courageous. He was defiant. The work you are about to witness was created by the hand of Pablo Picasso during the last week in the cold winter of November 1942.
One thing we found in this exploration of Picasso was that there was a story very few people knew. And that's the story of during World War II and the horrific occupation of Paris with starvation a daily threat. And Picasso was initially afraid in the occupation and fled Paris. But he refused the chance to flee France and go to safety in Mexico or Brazil, where he had invitations to go, and found the courage not only to return to Paris, but to use his fame to help others, so that the resistance, often resistance leaders, met and exchanged messages in his apartment, which daily was visited by some of the luminaries of the Parisian art scene, also daily visited by secret agents of the Gestapo and secret agents of the French police, trying to catch him in helping the resistance. So he was putting his life on the line, easily could have been deported to Germany, but continued to not only paint, but to do what he could to encourage the resistance.
The Picasso work was created in 1942 during the occupation of Paris, and it got lost in the discombobulation of the war. And so the art world had not seen this work of art for 75 years when I found it.
Paris, 2014. The lights, the cafes, the people, the arts. A journey through the Louvre brings the past into the present, and the present journey brings the past into the daily life of Ken Hawkins.
We're among the palatial gardens of Paris.
Never did Ken imagine himself sitting across the table from Pablo Picasso's son, Claude.
Nice to be here today. Something tells me that.
Because you see, we needed her. Yes,
Just left Claude Picasso in person. We had a marvelous meeting. The most interesting thing about the meeting is how charming and gracious and personable he was. And he made every effort to examine the piece closely, which I'm thrilled about. And we'll just have to see what he thinks about it. But it's such an honor to be in his company that no matter what comes of it, it was just a grand day for us here in Paris. Well, I did have the great pleasure of meeting Claude Picasso, who invited me to Paris, a very rare occasion, and I will tell you that he is remarkably charming and gracious, and he examined the piece very closely, and you could tell by many of the things that he said and many of his nonverbal actions how much he cherished the work and how rare he thought it was. It is the only work of art that was created on the back of a bill of currency. So it's of incredible value, and it's single in the world. There's no others like it. But what really makes it special is that through the circumstances of his life, there was an accident after he did this work of art. And that accident caused his blood droplets to fall onto the banknote. And so this is the only Picasso in the world that has his blood and his DNA on it. This has been deduced through forensic research, microscopic research, with the help of paper curators and art historians. We've examined it as a team to try to understand the circumstances of how the blood came to be on the note. So this is our best estimate of how it happened. Once he did this work of art, he was very proud of it. He loved it. He considered it a masterpiece. He signed it boldly in red, which he didn't do often. He did this on very special works of art that he did. Then he went to bed. And in the last week of November 1942, on the continent of Europe, they were experiencing the worst winter that they'd had in 100 years. Well, in his apartment, his third-story, uninsulated apartment,
The temperatures in his apartment would have fallen down into the high 30s during the night. Very, very cold. When he woke up the following morning, wanting to see the art, we believe that he wrapped himself in blankets and walked across his apartment to his studio. And on the way over there, he did something like that and accidentally created a nosebleed. And when he bent down to look at the art, the blood fell onto the note. And as he tried to wipe it off, when he pushed on the blood, it quickly absorbed into the banknote and permeated to the backside of the banknote. So on the back of the Picasso, there's blood stains that have come through the note. And then because he thought he ruined the note, bleeding on a peace image, he gave the note away. And the note was given away to somebody who was escaping Paris. And they put the note in a family photo album. And when they got to the border, the German guards didn't recognize that there was an original Picasso in the family photo album and let them escape with it. And we know that because in each of the four corners of the banknote, there are stains indicating how the image was held into a photo album. On each corner, there's this triangular tab that at one point was there, holding the note into the photo album. So that's how the blood got on the note. That's what happened as a result of the blood. And that's also how it got out of Paris and got lost. The most significant thing about the DNA is that you have to be able to identify the maternal bloodline. So the mother of Pablo Picasso is really the clue to proving that this is Picasso's blood. And so in order to find matching relatives in Spain, I had to create a family tree of Picasso going backwards generations and then making sure that they had an unbroken line of females that continue to carry the same blood DNA matches that Pablo Picasso had. Picasso has created a peace image of monumental importance. And he did it in the darkest period of Western civilization, under the thumb of the Nazis. Under tremendous oppression, he created a beautiful work of art, a peace image. And so his life is a reflection of tremendous moral courage. And using that story and this art to demonstrate it, I believe that we can bring a great story to stage that will have an impact on cultures around the world.
I think this musical has a great theme and a great couple at the center of it in one of the most significant times of the 20th century. So to have the honor of bringing that to the stage, to try to bring it to life in a way that is true to that theme, but at the same time is very personal and very intimate, about a love story at the center, about a story of a man gaining courage, about a story of a woman who stands her ground in that era, all in the face of the Nazi horror. It has been just an absolute privilege to work on that with Ken and trying to find the right words and the right lyrics and the right stories to tell. And I think we have a story people will be engaged by.
In every culture today, in every capital, people are afraid. There's a tremendous amount of discombobulation that's rising on every continent. There's terrorism, there's COVID, there's just incredible oppression against people, and we're on the edge of war. Everybody's afraid. I really hope to bring a peace banner, an image and a story about peace that can impact people in every culture, using art and the life of Pablo Picasso to tell that story. If people see beauty, they recognize beauty. They respond to beauty. If people hear music that touches their soul, it transcends cultures. The right art can do that. And particularly if people understand the story behind the art. And this peace image by Picasso is just that. It's an iconic peace image. and it can have an impact on people. So when I see the art now, all of those elements about his courage just come out of the art to me. And so that's how I'm affected by the art now. You know, when I started, I wasn't particularly a lover of art. I have become one. And perhaps the main reason why is because there's so much history, not only of the individual who created it, but the time in which he created it is fascinating. So I've not only learned about Picasso, I've learned about Francois Gillot. I've learned about his daughter, Maya. I've met the family members of Picasso. I consider myself a friend with Claude Picasso. I am still maneuvering or searching for a way that I can meet Paloma Picasso. Paloma is his daughter, and the name Paloma means the little dove. And so Picasso named his daughter after the 1949 work based on this work of art. And so I believe that Paloma would absolutely love this work of art. So the art is a gateway to so many relationships that I would have never had the opportunity to enjoy. It's not just the work of art, it's everything that surrounds it. I've met a lot of amazing people, and it's not me. It's this art that has taken me on this journey. The day I sell the art, you will find me in the corner of some room, crying my eyes out. Because the journey will have ended for me at that point. The journey is the magic. Meeting all these people is what's wonderful. And so I'm very, very thankful that I found this art.